T-minus 3, 2, 1, and we have liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission. It is a narrative etched into the American psyche, a moment frozen in time. Yet despite the decades of analysis, the full scope of this calamity remains obscured. Prepare yourselves as we are about to challenge the official record and expose the uncomfortable truths behind the smoke. We have just received urgent confirmation from the flight dynamics officer indicating a major malfunction. The vehicle has reportedly disintegrated. The flight director has formally acknowledged the loss of contact. Search and rescue teams are currently being mobilised to the impact zone. This date, January 28, 1986, marks a dark turning point as the Space Shuttle Challenger meets a catastrophic and heartbreaking end. However, the explosive footage seen around the world is merely the final chapter of a much deeper, more complex story of negligence hidden in plain sight. Stay tuned as we conduct a forensic examination of the evidence, unveiling chilling administrative failures and shocking revelations that paint a disturbing picture of what really happened in the corridors of power. To truly comprehend the magnitude of this disaster, we must first examine the ambitious program itself. The Space Shuttle was not just a rocket. It was promised as a commuter train to the stars, a revolutionary initiative designed to turn space travel into a routine, cost-effective enterprise. The Space Shuttle program, a bold gamble on the future of American dominance in orbit. For 3 decades, from 1981 until the final touchdown in 2011, this partially reusable system was the crown jewel of American engineering, a workhorse intended to make low Earth orbit accessible to more than just test pilots. Conceived by the visionaries at NASA, this massive vehicle was tasked with a heavy workload, ferrying astronauts, hauling heavy cargo, and serving as a launch pad for critical satellites and defense assets that monitored our world from above. Structurally, the shuttle stack was a complex triad of engineering marvels, each component critical to the survival of the crew. The system comprised 3 distinct elements: the winged orbiter, the massive external tank, and the twin solid rocket boosters flanking the assembly. The orbiter served as the brain and heart of the operation. This delta-winged aerospace plane measured 37.22 metres in length with a wingspan stretching 23.8 metres across. This technological wonder was propelled by 3 high-performance main engines guzzling a volatile cocktail of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen to generate a staggering 1.2 million pounds of thrust at sea level. Furthermore, for precise navigation within the vacuum of space, the vessel was equipped with a sophisticated orbital maneuvering system, allowing it to dance among the stars with surgical precision. Dwarfing the orbiter was the external tank, the structural backbone of the launch assembly. Standing at a towering 47 metres high with a diameter of 8.4 metres, it was truly a skyscraper of fuel. This colossal aluminum canister was coated in that iconic, distinct orange thermal foam, a necessary shield intended to prevent ice buildup and protect the cryogenic propellants from aerodynamic heating. Internally, it was a massive thermos split into 2 pressurized chambers, one holding super-chilled liquid oxygen and the other containing liquid hydrogen. This behemoth carried the lifeblood of the ascent, holding the massive volume of propellant required to feed the ravenous main engines during the climb to orbit. Flanking the tank were the solid rocket boosters, the brute force of the operation. These 2 towering pillars provided the initial kick necessary to break the chains of gravity. Packed with a highly combustible solid propellant mixture, these boosters unleashed a combined fury of 12 million pounds of thrust, accounting for the majority of the power at liftoff. It was this raw, unbridled power that punched the spacecraft through the dense lower atmosphere and into the stratosphere. In a typical mission profile, these boosters were designed to burn for 2 minutes before jettisoning, falling back to the Atlantic Ocean to be recovered, refurbished, and flown again, a key economic pillar of the shuttle concept. On that fateful morning, as the Challenger sat on the pad, 7 remarkable individuals strapped into their seats. This was not just a crew. It was a cross-section of American excellence, each member possessing a lifetime of achievement. They were poised to embark on a mission that represented the very best of humanity's thirst for knowledge. ready to push the boundaries of science and education in the vacuum of space. Let us introduce you to the Magnificent Seven, the heroes who gave their lives in pursuit of the final frontier. The crew of mission STS-51L was one of the most diverse and highly trained teams ever assembled. Tragically, their journey would last only 73 seconds, forever freezing their legacy on that cold January morning in 1986. Every single member on board brought a specific set of skills from aerospace engineering to payload management, creating a perfectly balanced unit. Their primary objectives were critical: the deployment of the tracking and data relay satellite B, and the execution of a curriculum of lessons to be broadcast to classrooms across the nation. Leading this expedition was a man who embodied the spirit of the right stuff. As the countdown ticked away, the mission was in the hands of a true veteran of the skies. Known for his quiet confidence and unshakable command presence, Commander Francis Dick Scobee was an American icon whose life story is essential to understanding the gravity of this loss. A closer look at the life and service of Commander Francis Dick Scobee. Commander Scobee was not merely a pilot, he was a master aviator and a natural leader who played an instrumental role in the development and execution of the Challenger's flight profile. Born on May 19, 1939 in the small town of Cle Elum, Washington, Scobee's journey took him from humble beginnings to the cockpit of high-performance aircraft, logging over 7,000 flight hours in the United States Air Force. His intellectual prowess was equal to his piloting skills, having earned a Bachelor of Science degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Arizona, providing him with the technical vocabulary to speak the language of the engineers. Although he called Auburn, Washington his home, his eyes were always turned upward, developing an obsession with flight that would define his entire existence from adolescence onward. This childhood passion matured into a professional calling, driving him to enlist in the Air Force, where he honed the discipline and reflexes that are the hallmarks of a test pilot. His resume was spotless, filled with years of combat training and test flight operations that gave him an intuitive understanding of complex aerospace systems. In 1978, NASA recognized his exceptional talent, selecting Scobee along with a new class of astronauts to lead the agency into the shuttle era. He was part of the Vanguard, the new breed of space travelers chosen specifically to pilot the reusable spacecraft that succeeded the Apollo moon missions. The selection board was impressed not just by his stick and rudder skills, but by his psychological fortitude, his ability to remain calm when the warning lights started flashing. Before the fatal launch, Scobee had already proven his mettle in orbit, having served as the pilot for mission STS-41C and was tapped to command the ill-fated STS-51L. His prior experience in the commander's seat gave him invaluable insight into the idiosyncrasies of the orbiter experience that would have been vital had the mission proceeded as planned. Within the astronaut corps, Scobee was revered for his lack of ego and his steady hand, earning the absolute trust of his crewmates and the respect of the flight control teams in Houston. His preparation for the Challenger launch was exhaustive, involving hundreds of hours in simulators, rehearsing every conceivable contingency from launch aborts to emergency re-entry scenarios. Furthermore, he engaged in rigorous high-level simulations alongside the flight control teams stationed at headquarters. These exercises were critical for coordinating with personnel monitoring the orbiter from both the primary Houston command post and remote tracking facilities. Commander Scobee approached the mission's demands with absolute precision, having mastered every contingency protocol and demonstrating total competency in all operational objectives. As the mission commander, Scobee bore the ultimate responsibility, charged with the safety of the crew and the structural integrity of the Challenger spacecraft itself. Holding the highest rank on the flight deck, he commanded deep respect from his colleagues and agency leadership alike for his unflappable nature and steady leadership style. Sitting to the commander's right was pilot Michael J. Smith, a man defined by his nerves of steel and a distinguished aviation background. He was poised and ready to assist Commander Scobee in guiding the massive orbiter through the atmosphere and into the vacuum of space. Born in the coastal town of Beaufort, North Carolina on April 30th, 1945, Smith seemed destined for the skies from an early age. His path to the stars began with his graduation from the prestigious United States Naval Academy, followed by a decorated combat tour in Southeast Asia. Back in 1967, Smith secured his Bachelor of Science degree in naval science, laying the academic groundwork for his future career. He continued his relentless pursuit of knowledge at the United States Naval Postgraduate School located in Monterey, California. It was there in 1968 that he successfully defended his thesis to earn a Master of Science degree in aeronautical engineering. Smith subsequently advanced to elite military aviation training at Naval Air Station Kingsville in Texas, honing his skills in high-performance jets. By May of 1969, he had earned his gold aviator wings, cementing his status as a top-tier pilot for the United States Navy. His logbook was nothing short of extraordinary, recording 4,867.7 flight hours across 28 distinct types of civilian and military airframes. During his naval service, he piloted the A-6 Intruder with Attack Squadron 52, launching from the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Kitty Hawk. This deployment placed him in the thick of the Vietnam War in 1972, where his skills were tested under fire. While serving with VA, 52 Smith played a pivotal role in Operation Linebacker, a massive and critical aerial interdiction campaign against North Vietnamese targets. NASA recognised his exceptional talent, selecting him for the astronaut corps in 1980, along with a handful of other elite candidates. He was part of a new generation of spacefarers, one of the first groups chosen to lead the agency following the conclusion of the Apollo era. Officials noted that Smith was selected specifically for his superior piloting instincts and his ability to maintain absolute focus under extreme duress. On the fatal flight, Smith served as the pilot of the Space Shuttle Challenger, ranking second in the chain of command only to Commander Francis Dick Scobee. In the lead up to the launch, Smith underwent a grueling training regimen, mastering complex simulations of both the ascent phase and atmospheric re-entry. His preparation included extensive coordination with ground controllers, ensuring seamless communication between the shuttle mission control and outlying support stations. Smith was widely admired for his calm professional demeanour, a trait that earned him the unwavering confidence of his fellow crew members and NASA administrators. It remains a haunting historical footnote that Smith's voice was the very last sound captured on the Challenger's cockpit voice recorder. Moving to the mission specialist, Dr. Judith Resnik brought an unparalleled level of scientific acumen and technical expertise to the mission's manifest. She was a true pioneer in every sense of the word, shattering glass ceilings and expanding the definition of who could explore the cosmos. Her relentless drive for innovation and discovery established a legacy that continues to resonate as we move through 2026. Beyond her credentials, Judith A. Resnik is remembered as a remarkable individual whose contributions significantly advanced humanity's foothold in space. An Akron, Ohio native born on April 5, 1949, Resnik made history as a member of the 1978 astronaut class, the first to include women. A brilliant academic, she earned a doctorate in electrical engineering from the University of Maryland and built a formidable career as a biomedical engineer and staff scientist. She was a veteran of spaceflight, having previously served on mission STS-41D, where she was responsible for primary scientific operations. On that maiden voyage, she expertly operated the remote manipulator system, proving her dexterity and technical mastery in zero gravity. She successfully deployed 3 satellites and managed complex biomedical experiments before being assigned to her second flight, STS-51L. Tragically, that mission ended in disaster when the shuttle disintegrated just 73 seconds into its ascent on January 28th. Resnik is eulogized today as a highly driven and accomplished astronaut, celebrated for her technical brilliance and infectious enthusiasm for the stars. She was a fierce advocate for women in STEM fields, standing as a powerful role model for countless young women aspiring to engineering and science careers. Despite her life being cut short, Resnik's influence remains a powerful force, inspiring new generations of explorers across the globe. Her dedication to her craft and her sacrifices have left an indelible mark on the history of the space program and on scientific progress worldwide. Rounding out this extraordinary team was mission specialist Ellison Onizuka, who brought a brilliant mind and a unique cultural perspective to the crew. Onizuka was a trailblazer who broke through racial barriers to push the very limits of human knowledge and exploration. His story remains a testament to the American spirit, inspiring diverse generations to pursue their dreams. Born on June 24, 1946, in Kealakekwa, Kona, Hawaii, he holds the distinction of being the first Asian American astronaut selected in 1978. An alumnus of the University of Colorado at Boulder, Onizuka earned both his bachelor's and master's degrees in the demanding field of aerospace engineering. Ellison Onizuka's biography is defined by an unwavering, lifelong fascination with the final frontier, marking him as a man destined for the stars from the very beginning. Reports indicate that even during his formative years, he was completely captivated by the mysteries of the cosmos and harboured a relentless ambition to one day traverse the void of space himself. His academic journey led him to the University of Colorado, where he not only distinguished himself within the Reserve Officers Training Corps, but also demonstrated leadership as the president of the Association of Engineering Students. Upon completing his degree, Onizuka transitioned into national service, securing a vital role with the United States Air Force as an aerospace flight test engineer stationed at the strategic Sacramento Air Logistics Center. In a career-defining move in 1978, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration tapped Onizuka for the astronaut corps, prompting his relocation to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, to commence rigorous preparation. He was a standout member of a historic cohort of 35 aspiring shuttle pilots who initiated their intense training regimen at the facility, successfully earning their wings by 1979. While awaiting his prime opportunity to command the skies, Onizuka served a critical function on the ground, working with the launch support teams for the orbiters Columbia Challenger and Discovery. The history books recorded his official ascent into orbit aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery during mission STS-51C, a milestone operation that took place in 1985. Throughout that specific deployment, Onizuka was tasked with executing complex scientific protocols and manning the shuttle's remote manipulator system, a high-stakes responsibility. This mission was culturally monumental as it established Onizuka as the first Asian American explorer and the first individual of Japanese heritage to ever leave the Earth's atmosphere. Tragically, Onizuka's second deployment aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger mission STS-51L ended in disaster when the vehicle suffered a catastrophic failure just 73 seconds after liftoff on January 28, 1986. The nation mourned as Onizuka was identified as one of the 7 brave crew members whose lives were claimed in that heartbreaking televised calamity. We turn our attention now to Ronald McNair, a physicist and trailblazing astronaut whose rise to prominence shattered societal barriers and defied the odds stacked against him. Born in 1950, mission specialist McNair's story is one of intellect triumphing over adversity in an era of significant social change. Dr. Ronald Erwin McNair, a distinguished physicist and space explorer, maintained grand ambitions, refusing to let the systemic prejudice of his early environment stifle his potential. Despite coming of age in a marginalised African-American community in the Deep South, he remained steadfast, rejecting any notion that his background could preclude a high-level career in the sciences. McNair proved to be an academic powerhouse, securing his Bachelor of Science degree in physics from North Carolina A&T State University in 1971. He continued his relentless pursuit of knowledge, eventually obtaining a prestigious PhD in laser physics from the world-renowned Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1976. By the tender age of 26, McNair had already established himself as a leading authority in laser physics while conducting advanced research at the Hughes Research Laboratory. His exceptional track record caught the attention of federal recruiters, leading to his selection for the elite Space Shuttle program during the intake of 1978. McNair served with distinction as a mission specialist on the 1984 Challenger flight, earning widespread admiration and professional accolades for his performance. Over the course of his illustrious career, McNair was the recipient of numerous distinctions, including 3 honorary doctorates and a host of fellowships recognising his genius. His trophy cabinet included prestigious titles such as Presidential Scholar Ford Foundation Fellow National Fellowship Fund Fellow and the Omega Psi Phi Scholar of the Year. Furthermore, he was recognised as a distinguished national scientist and honoured with the title of Friend of Freedom for his contributions to society. Beyond his formidable intellect, McNair was a true Renaissance man holding a 5th-degree black belt in karate and possessing the soul of a talented jazz saxophonist. Privately, he is remembered as a devoted family man, a loving partner, and a dedicated father to 2 children who survive his legacy. In the wake of the devastating 1986 Challenger tragedy, the United States Congress moved to immortalise his name by authorising the Ronald E. McNair Post-Baccalaureate Achievement Programme. This federal initiative, crafted in Dr. McNair's memory, is designed to empower underrepresented minority students to push forward toward graduate-level education. The programme specifically targets students of colour and first-generation college attendees from low-income backgrounds, providing the financial backing and structural support needed to realise their academic dreams. The curriculum is rigorously designed to uphold the exacting standards of excellence that Dr. McNair embodied throughout his life. It serves as a living continuation of his commitment to education, ensuring his passion for teaching and inspiring future generations endures well beyond 2026. Finally, we examine the legacy of Christa McAuliffe, the woman known as America's teacher in space, who prepared to take her classroom to the ultimate altitude. Her story leaves an indelible mark on history, fundamentally altering the public's perception of the cosmos and humanity's role within the universe. Payload specialist Christa McAuliffe became the face of a new era in civilian space travel. McAuliffe was a beloved figure who played a pivotal role in NASA's Teacher in Space initiative, a government campaign designed to spark a renewed interest in science and mathematics among the nation's youth. A dedicated high school social studies instructor hailing from Concord, New Hampshire, McAuliffe represented the best of the American educational system. In a highly competitive process, she was selected from a pool of more than 11,000 applicants to become the first private citizen to fly aboard the Space Shuttle. The initiative was formally unveiled by President Ronald Reagan in August 1984. Acting as the flagship component of NASA's broader strategy to include civilians in spaceflight, the administration's goal was to democratize space exploration, and after an exhaustive vetting process, McAuliffe was named the primary candidate. This rigorous selection protocol involved extensive medical screenings and interviews with Barbara Morgan of Idaho, named as her designated backup should McAuliffe be unable to fly. McAuliffe dedicated the following year to intense training at the Johnson Space Center, preparing to broadcast 2 live educational segments directly from orbit. Her planned curriculum was set to cover fundamental scientific concepts including magnetism, Newton's laws of motion, and the operation of simple machines in microgravity. The selection of McAuliffe as the inaugural teacher in space was considered a watershed moment in the history of public space engagement. It represented a bold strategic effort to bridge the gap between the scientific elite and the classroom, aiming to cultivate the next generation of American engineers and scientists. As an educator, she possessed the unique ability to connect with young minds poised to share the wonder of space travel in a language that resonated with students across the country. Regrettably, Christa McAuliffe's aspirations were brought to a heartbreaking end when the orbiter disintegrated in the skies above Florida. This catastrophe struck a profound blow to the American psyche and the trajectory of the space program, yet her influence refused to fade into history. In the wake of the Challenger tragedy, NASA honoured her memory by maintaining its bond with educational institutions through initiatives like the Educator Astronaut Project. This pivotal program empowered teachers to join the elite astronaut corps, effectively bridging the gap between orbital exploration and the traditional classroom. As we look back from 2026, McAuliffe's spirit of adventure and her dedication to education continue to inspire students and teachers across the globe. Stepping onto the launch pad to face the great void was Gregory Jarvis, a figure synonymous with technical brilliance and scientific ingenuity, poised for a historic journey. He stood prepared to slip the surly bonds of Earth, aiming to inspire a new generation with his deep expertise and unyielding passion for discovery. We turn our attention now to the profile of payload specialist Gregory Jarvis. An accomplished American engineer, Jarvis was among the 7 courageous souls who perished when the Space Shuttle Challenger was destroyed during mission STS-51L. Hailing from Detroit, Michigan, where he was born on August 24, 1944, Jarvis completed his secondary education at Mohawk Central High in 1962. His academic journey was marked by excellence, securing a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from the State University of New York at Buffalo in 1967. He furthered his technical mastery with a Master of Science in the same discipline from Northeastern University just 2 years later in 1969. Commissioned into the United States Air Force in 1969, he served with distinction until his honourable discharge as a captain in 1973. Transitioning to the private sector following his military tenure, Jarvis brought his talents to Hughes Aircraft in 1984 as a payload specialist. Jarvis was officially selected for the Challenger's STS-51L roster, designated specifically as a payload specialist for the flight. Slated as the agency's 25th shuttle voyage, his primary objective was to investigate fluid dynamics within a microgravity environment. While the vessel lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the objective was never realized as the crew was unable to reach orbit. Recovery teams eventually located his remains on the lower mid-deck of the crew compartment alongside those of Dr. Ronald McNair and Christa McAuliffe. Following the recovery operation, Jarvis was cremated, and in a final act of returning to nature, his ashes were scattered across the vast Pacific Ocean. To honour his memory, the University at Buffalo rechristened their East Engineering Building as Jarvis Hall, accompanied by a commemorative sculpture on the grounds. Additionally, public infrastructure bears his name. The New York Power Authority dedicated a hydroelectric facility near his birthplace to his legacy. This facility is formally known as the Gregory B. Jarvis Power Project. Meanwhile, as the countdown clock marched towards zero, the crowd waited with bated breath. The destiny of 7 courageous individuals was suspended in the balance seated atop what would become a fiery crucible of fate known as the Challenger. The spacecraft stood poised to release a cataclysm of raw power, a thunderous roar destined to shatter the morning silence and scar history forever. The road to this calamity began back in 1984, involving months of preparation and 37 weeks of rigorous crew training. Crucially, investigations reveal the accident unfolded well after the mission's originally projected launch window had already closed. Following a flight readiness review on January 15th, administration officials adjusted the timeline, repeatedly shuffling dates and times. These shifts were calculated to accommodate potential abort scenarios and to align with the optimal window for observing Halley's Comet. Observing the comet was a primary scientific goal of the Challenger's itinerary alongside the deployment of the Spartan satellite system. After numerous administrative postponements, the agency initially targeted January 22, 1986 for liftoff. The situation grew increasingly complex as technical and environmental setbacks plagued the mission in the days preceding the eventual launch. That particular January remains infamous for its biting cold, with mercury levels dropping well below freezing, creating unprecedented launch conditions. Gene Thomas famously noted that despite the awareness of a potential catastrophic failure within the engineering teams, there was immense administrative pressure on NASA to maintain a high frequency of shuttle operations and launches. Citing severe weather concerns, Mission Control advanced the schedule, shifting the attempt from the 26th to the 27th. On the 27th, the Challenger sat tantalizingly close to departure, with all systems apparently go, and the crew fully prepped. Agency logs indicate the astronauts began their pre-flight protocols as early as 12:30 in the morning. Awaking at 5:07, they were strapped into the module by 7:56, only to report a door sensor malfunction roughly an hour later. The anomaly was traced to an exterior hatch mechanism that was failing to register as securely closed. Although ground support secured the door, they could not retract the external handle due to a seized frozen bolt in the assembly. For 2 agonizing hours, technicians wrestled with the mechanism using handheld drills and hacksaws to free the stripped screw. By the time the hardware was finally cleared, the crew had been strapped in for 5 hours and the launch window had tragically passed. The chaotic scene prompted one observer to remark that the operation resembled a Three Stooges sketch rather than high-tech aerospace engineering. Kennedy Shuttle Chief Bob Sayek addressed the press stating it was simply not our day and confirmed plans to recycle for a Tuesday attempt. The Space Shuttle Challenger finally initiated its main engines on January 28, 1986 at 11:38 in the morning. We are reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center, specifically focusing our attention on the eastern perimeter at Launch Complex 39B. Leading up to this moment, the 7-member astronaut corps strictly adhered to a rigorous pre-flight timeline, which included their transfer to the pad, the donning of pressure suits, and strapping into the crew module. The flight crew executed a comprehensive series of systems diagnostics to verify the orbiter was flight ready, while ground teams performed repeated safety sweeps to check for dangerous ice accumulation on the structure. These final safety assessments were absolutely critical for the go-no-go decision, as the discovery of any significant anomalies during this phase would have mandated an immediate and indefinite delay of the mission. The terminal countdown sequence initiated the ignition of the shuttle's 3 main engines, followed milliseconds later by the powerful firing of the twin solid rocket boosters. With millions watching, the shuttle cleared the launch tower and began its vertical ascent through the atmosphere, carrying its crew towards orbit. However, the timeline of events that transpired immediately following the liftoff was both heartbreakingly short and devastatingly tragic. At precisely 6.6 seconds into the flight, the shuttle's main liquid-fueled engines achieved full thrust, immediately succeeded by the ignition of the solid propellant boosters. Mere moments later, at the 7-second mark, the vehicle initiated its scheduled roll maneuver, an action that was promptly acknowledged and confirmed by flight controllers stationed in Houston. Telemetry data indicates the main engines throttled back to 94% thrust, at 24 seconds, dropping further to 65% at 42 seconds, to reduce aerodynamic stress before ramping back up to 104% at 59 seconds. The final verbal transmission from the flight deck was received at 65 seconds, confirming the return to full throttle and reporting that all systems were performing nominally. Then, in a fraction of a second, the situation turned catastrophic. Telemetry signals abruptly ceased at the 73-second mark, plunging mission control into a stunned silence as data screens went blank. Investigations suggest the astronauts had absolutely no warning of any malfunction prior to the violent structural disintegration of the entire shuttle stack. Broadcast footage provided the first harrowing visual confirmation of the failure, while military radar simultaneously began tracking multiple debris signatures diverging from the flight path. Moments later, the flight dynamics officer in Houston relayed the devastating assessment that no one wanted to hear the vehicle had suffered a catastrophic explosive event. Approximately 30 seconds after the breakup, the range safety officer transmitted the destruct command to the errant solid rocket boosters, which were displaying anomalous exhaust plumes clearly visible to the naked eye. Simultaneously, the orbiter's flight path veered sharply off course, subjecting the crew compartment to violent and sudden gravitational forces far exceeding standard operational limits. Recovered audio from the flight deck recorder reveals that Commander Scobee and Pilot Smith were actively analysing the irregular aerodynamic pressures and visible smoke in the final moments. The root cause of this national tragedy has been traced to a failure of the O-ring pressure seals in the right-hand solid rocket booster, occurring roughly 73 seconds into the flight. This breach triggered a chain reaction, igniting a massive conflagration that obliterated the external fuel tank and compromised the structural integrity of the solid rocket boosters. Reports indicate the astronauts remained completely unaware of the developing crisis until the very instant of the explosion, which consumed the vehicle in mere seconds. According to investigative reporting by the New York Times, flight controllers operating on delayed telemetry initially continued to relay nominal status updates even as the disaster was unfolding in the skies above. Public Affairs Officer Stephen A. Nesbitt continued to provide tracking commentary well past the 105-second mark, tragically unaware that the radar blips he was following were debris rather than an intact spacecraft. Forensic analysis of the wreckage revealed that 3 emergency air packs had been manually activated, and the final voice captured on the loop was identified as pilot Michael J. Smith. His final utterance, a simple yet chilling expression of alarm, was logged at exactly 73 seconds, marking the precise moment he realised the severity of the situation. Even as the main engines continued to generate thrust, the crew found themselves completely unable to correct the shuttle's erratic and fatal deviation. The orbiter disintegrated almost instantly under the aerodynamic stress, exposing the crew module to extreme gravitational loads as it was torn from the rest of the fuselage. With the main propulsion system still active but useless, the spacecraft came apart at an altitude of roughly 15 kilometres, leading to the catastrophic loss of all 7 souls on board. Ultimately, aviation experts have concluded that at that specific altitude and velocity, there were simply no viable abort scenarios that could have saved the crew. Both the astronauts in the air and the controllers on the ground were rendered helpless against the physics of the failure, a grim testament to the inherent dangers of human spaceflight. However, our investigation reveals that fatal systemic flaws were lurking within the program long before the countdown began. The hidden truths behind the Challenger's destruction were about to be dragged into the light, exposing deep-seated issues beneath the agency's polished surface. The primary technical cause of this disaster has been identified as a catastrophic failure of the O-ring seals located within the joints of the right-hand solid rocket booster. These crucial rubber gaskets, engineered to contain superheated propellant gases, lost their elasticity due to the record-breaking low temperatures, creating a leak path that torched the adjacent external fuel tank. This failure point directly precipitated the vehicle's destruction. Documents show that on the eve of the mission, NASA officials held an emergency conference call with Morton Thiokol, the contractor responsible for the O-rings, specifically to discuss the thermal risks. During these deliberations, engineers from Thiokol issued a stark warning: launching in temperatures lower than 53 degrees Fahrenheit was highly dangerous, and they strongly advised a postponement. In a controversial move that is now the subject of intense scrutiny, NASA management overruled these technical objections and elected to proceed with the countdown. On the morning of the flight, ambient temperatures had plummeted to 36 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius, well outside the certified safety envelope for the dual O-ring seals in the booster joints. The freezing conditions stiffened the O-rings in the right booster, preventing them from sealing the joint, which allowed a jet of searing gas to escape and burn directly through the wall of the external liquid hydrogen tank. Internal memos reveal that engineering teams had been documenting problems with O-ring erosion and gas blow-by on previous missions for quite some time. Yet agency leadership repeatedly classified these warning signs as an acceptable risk, failing to authorise necessary design corrections before it was too late. The findings of the Presidential Rogers Commission have since condemned NASA's internal culture, citing a flawed decision-making process and bureaucratic complacency as primary contributors to the accident. Despite possessing knowledge of the O-ring vulnerabilities for several years, agency officials systematically ignored critical warnings from their own technical experts. In the final analysis, the loss of Challenger was an entirely preventable tragedy born from a lethal combination of hardware defects, adverse weather, and a management failure to prioritise astronaut safety over launch schedules. This disaster now stands as a permanent, powerful reminder of the absolute importance of integrity and vigilance in high-stakes engineering. We begin this report by examining the critical failure to heed expert warnings, a systemic oversight that allowed known technical risks to spiral unchecked until they resulted in a catastrophic loss of life. As the plumes of smoke dissipated and the debris began to rain down into the Atlantic, a stunned American public found itself struggling to comprehend a disaster that seemed technically impossible just moments before. What began as a morning of national triumph and anticipation instantly curdled into tragedy, leaving the entire world to pick up the shattered pieces of the American dream. This is our special coverage, the fallout of the Challenger disaster. The explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger on January 28, 1986, stands as a seminal moment in history, a devastating event that shook the foundations of the country and forced a hard look at the realities of the space program. Breaking news of the explosion travelled across the globe at lightning speed, plunging millions into a state of collective grief and utter disbelief. The loss of the 7 brave crew members was a tremendous blow to the national psyche, leaving citizens and officials alike struggling to come to terms with the magnitude of the tragedy. The accident served as a brutal, unforgiving reminder of the extreme risks and inherent dangers that come with the territory of human space exploration. Inside the corridors of NASA, the space program was shaken to its core, with astronauts, engineers and ground technicians grappling with a profound sense of personal loss and professional grief. This disaster violently highlighted the non-negotiable importance of safety protocols and engineering reliability within the nation's space initiatives. In the immediate aftermath, Washington launched an extensive high-level investigation to determine the root cause of the accident and to identify every single contributing factor. The Rogers Commission, officially established by President Ronald Reagan through an executive order, was charged with leading this critical inquiry into what went wrong. This Blue Ribbon Commission was comprised of 12 distinguished members, including former Secretary of State William P. Rogers, the legendary Neil Armstrong, and pioneering astronaut Sally K. Ride. Their mandate from the White House was clear conduct, a thorough, unflinching and independent investigation to identify the specific factors that contributed to the fatal accident. The investigation aimed to provide the public with answers and to ensure that policies were put in place so that such a horrific tragedy would never occur again on American soil. During this dark period, the nation and the entire aerospace community came together to mourn the loss of the 7 heroes and to commit to learning the hard lessons of the disaster. After months of testimony and analysis, the Rogers Commission investigation identified several key factors, both technical and human, that directly contributed to the Challenger disaster. The Commission's findings were damning, revealing that NASA was plagued by significant organisational failures, including a dangerous lack of communication and coordination between different departments. Furthermore, the report highlighted that the agency suffered from murky lines of authority and responsibility, allowing critical safety concerns to be overlooked. This bureaucratic confusion led to severe communication breakdowns at the most critical moments leading up to the launch. These breakdowns included a systemic lack of clear and timely communication between internal departments and, crucially, with the external contractors responsible for the shuttle's components. Beyond the management issues, the Commission also identified significant fatal technical failures within the hardware of the Space Shuttle program itself. Most notably, the report cited a lack of reliable and redundant safety systems, as well as woefully inadequate testing and validation of the shuttle's sensitive components under extreme conditions. To prevent a recurrence of such a catastrophe, the Rogers Commission issued a series of sweeping recommendations to NASA and the broader space program. These recommendations mandated improving communication channels, overhauling coordination strategies, enhancing safety procedures, and significantly strengthening the testing and validation protocols. The Commission's recommendations were designed to aggressively address the deep-seated organisational and technical failures that had been allowed to fester. These were the very failures that the investigation concluded had directly contributed to the destruction of the Challenger. By implementing these rigorous changes, it was believed that NASA and the space program could significantly reduce the risk of facing similar tragedies in the future. This tragedy sparked a total transformation in the space program, a shift that would forever alter the way the American public and the government viewed the conquest of the final frontier. The long road of rebuilding and reckoning. The Challenger disaster of January 28, 1986 had a profound and lasting impact on NASA's internal culture and the public's perception of space travel. It was a major heartbreaking setback that prompted sweeping congressionally monitored reforms in safety risk management and organisational practices. In response to the Commission's findings, NASA implemented stricter safety protocols, developed more reliable and redundant systems, and introduced rigorous testing and validation procedures to prevent similar accidents. Training for astronauts and engineers was also significantly enhanced, incorporating more realistic disaster simulations and improved instructional materials to prepare for worst-case scenarios. NASA also moved to strengthen internal communication and coordination with its network of defence and aerospace contractors. They established clearer, unambiguous protocols to ensure that critical safety information was shared effectively and reached the decision makers who needed to hear it. Additionally, the agency worked to increase transparency and accountability within its ranks to regain the public trust. They began providing more detailed, unvarnished information to both the American public and the oversight bodies on Capitol Hill. While the tragedy shocked the nation and initially led to a severe loss of confidence in NASA, it ultimately sparked a renewed, non-negotiable emphasis on safety and the importance of listening to technical experts over political pressure. The structural and cultural changes that followed laid the foundation for a much more cautious, transparent, and responsible approach to space exploration in the decades that followed. The Challenger disaster remains a heartbreaking event in our history, one that highlighted fatal flaws in NASA's culture and processes at the time. But it also served as a pivotal turning point for the industry. The ultimate sacrifices of the Challenger crew continue to inspire modern efforts to prioritise safety, integrity and engineering excellence in all space missions. Though it marked a dark chapter in NASA's history, the hard-earned lessons led to meaningful improvements that continue to shape the trajectory of the space program today. That wraps up our special report on this pivotal moment in history. We want to hear your perspective on how this event shaped the future of exploration. Leave your comments below. Thank you for joining us for this broadcast. Until next time, stay informed.